Hi, I'm Mark Mazzaferro, Public Information Officer for the City of Vacaville, and this is a new episode of On the Beat with Vacaville Police Chief John Carli. John, thank you for taking some time out of your day today.
Good to see you again, as always.
Good to see you. Today's subject is one that's been on the city radar for some time now, but one that's actually getting a lot of traction and being addressed thanks to your efforts in the police department, and that is homelessness.
Yes.
A social issue for sure, but certainly a police issue as well. They kind of come together, and that kind of leads to today's discussion. We've got a new roundtable. We're big on roundtables in Vacaville. We have the senior roundtable, we have the youth roundtable. Now we have the homeless roundtable, which you are in charge of. So you also have a guest with you today, Sergeant Dave Kellis, who is a big part of that effort too. So why don't you talk about the homeless roundtable, talk about what Dave does, and Dave, feel free to jump in whenever John makes a mistake. We certainly do that a lot. No, just kidding.
Well, I can tell you the homelessness issue is nothing new to communities across the country. And Vacaville is a generous community. People want to give, people want to help others, and it's something that we've seen for several years. A couple of years back, there was a paper that was written that included staff from the city and also community members called the white paper on homeless. Mm-hmm. It was also shared with the council, so the council has received that as an example. I think the challenge in all that is what was learned from that is the slogan, "There's a Better Way," really is the campaign title for how are we going to address what is perceived as homeless, both the perception and the reality. Well,
let's talk about that real quick, because you talk about it's a problem throughout a lot of communities, and it's certainly in some communities, large metropolitan areas, it's a huge problem. I mean, it's very visible. But talk about what the issues are like here in Vacaville and what we're hearing from residents, from businesses, those kinds of things.
Well, I'll start it and then I'll turn it over to Dave because he deals with it on a regular basis in patrol and also in the community. The issue of homelessness is a very misunderstood term. You think of transient and it probably brings to mind somebody drifting through town. You think of homelessness and you think with maybe some sense of pity, some sense of concern for maybe I have it better than someone else and therefore I should probably do my part to help. That the unintended consequence of that is one of the discussions we have at the roundtable, and that is for the faith-based community and other organizations, what is it about your program that, if successful, has an unintended consequence? For instance, if you feed homeless in the park, is 100 homeless that you fed this week trying to be equaled next week by 200 a success? Or is that an example of a failure? Are we drawing more, or are there that many? And so part of that is to study how many do we have, what does homelessness look like, and who can you truly address and help? And so the Cal Chiefs has been very open about trying to offer education and training. Our focus here in Vacaville is a three-pronged approach. It's enforcement, which is what most people think that's what the police are going to do, even though it's a social issue. Mm-hmm. The other part, though, really focuses on education and engagement, of which you're a part of on the education portion, to help people know the difference between someone who's homeless and someone who appears homeless because they're on the street corner. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave because he's been dealing with what the appearance is on the street corner.
Going specifically into our panhandling, that's been a lot of the issues that we've had, a lot of complaints from citizens about a lot of our businesses having panhandlers on the entries and exits. And we've had a chance to contact a lot of the panhandlers that are around our community. And what we found from communicating with them is that a very small percentage of those people are actually homeless. Mm-hmm. Most of the panhandlers that we've dealt with in town have houses, have apartments. Many of them actually come into Vacaville from other communities and commute on a daily basis in because we have such a generous population here that will give. And so they drive in, set up on a corner for several hours, collect money, and then go home. Very small percentage of our panhandlers are actually our homeless community.
Well, and let me just interrupt you real quick. You talk about panhandlers. There's the two folks at the Nugget parking lot. There's a guy over at Winco. There's somebody at Starbucks on Alamo. I mean, there's another guy over at Costco. So these people, I mean, everybody recognizes these folks, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and on the one hand, that's a good thing, certainly, because okay, well, they're familiar faces. It's not this steady stream of a different person every day. But by the same token, it goes to what you just talked about. They're not homeless. They're able-bodied. They can work. But they're doing well here in Vacaville, aren't they?
They are doing well. Many times we contact people and like I said, they're coming specifically to Vacaville because Vacaville is so generous and they get a fairly decent income. I wouldn't want to estimate how much money they're getting, but they get a decent income enough for them to, we contacted one last week that commutes in twice a week from Sacramento, enough for him to spend his own gas money to drive to Vacaville to collect money for several hours and then go back home to Sacramento. They're doing well with what they're doing.
And there's no law against standing there and saying, please give me money, right?
No, we can't.
Or is there?
We can't specifically outlaw panhandling. What we have been able to do is the City Council recently passed an ordinance putting guidelines on panhandling and soliciting for safety to make it as safe as we possibly can.
Right, and that's always my concern. I'm driving out of the parking lot, and here's somebody with a sign about ready to hop in front of my car and listen, I'm not the greatest driver. I have a hard enough time getting out of parking lots as it is, but you're right. It's a safety issue for them and for me as well. Plus, it's a quality of life thing. As much compassion as you want to have for these folks, when there's and because I've talked with you guys before about this, what the situation is. It makes you angry too. Darn it. And
the regulation is from the city ordinance is about time, place, and manner. So it doesn't say anything about whether you can do it. It just simply says there's places where you can't because of safety.
Right.
And the law and the courts have decided this in depth. So by doing so, it removes the hazardous condition that occurs outside of some of the busy streets to the driveways. And so that has been a campaign that once it was adopted by the council here in the spring, we gave over 30 days, it was probably more like 45 days, to those who were doing it, and then educated them and made note that we had made contact with them. And so far, I think there's only been one citation for somebody that had been previously contacted and then violated that. Our goal is to educate those who are doing it, and hopefully that will then become the norm. And I think what we've already seen is a incredible decrease in the panhandling, especially around the streets where it was very hazardous.
Right, and I was just going to say, all those places I mentioned, I've been to all of them within the last week, and those folks are gone. And I'm assuming it's because we've educated them about our new enforcement and our new rules, and they got the message, which is great.
Yeah, like the chief said, the ordinance went on the books early May. We made the determination that we wouldn't start citing for it until into June because we wanted to have the opportunity to go out and educate the public. We had these flyers created, one for business owners that commonly get panhandlers in their area, and one for the actual panhandlers or solicitors that kind of explains the ordinance to them. We explained a procedure to the officers. Officers went out, contacted the normal areas that you spoke of, and the common panhandlers that we see on a daily basis, explain the ordinance to them, hand them a flyer to explain, here's the regulations that you're going to need to follow, and let them know that in the future that they'd be cited for it. And the people have been very receptive of it. They've actually been very thankful that we're educating them on the law instead of just citing them for it.
Right away, give them a ticket, right.
And it's seen a marked decrease in our panhandlers in the area. Like I said, it doesn't make panhandling illegal, but it makes certain guidelines, like that you can't panhandle within 15 feet of a driveway to a business, so that they don't step out in front of a car, like you said, so that they can't panhandle within 15 feet of an ATM machine, so that the citizens feel safe. They don't feel someone standing over their shoulder as they're taking money out of an ATM machine. It's now unlawful to panhandle on a city bus. It's kind of a captive audience type of thing. They feel pressured. Other guidelines like that just kind of make sure that everybody's being safe.
Well, it's good. I've seen a difference, and I'm sure a lot of our residents have seen a difference too, and that's great. But let's talk about homelessness now, because as you said, panhandlers aren't necessarily homeless. In fact, most of them are living, I don't want to say comfortably, but they have accommodations. I think when you talk about homeless, we're talking about people who live in tents and sleeping bags and by the creek, and whatever empty lot might be available in the city, and that's the more visible homeless person that we see. So one thing I've learned as a member of the Homeless Roundtable is and John, you said it earlier, there's a lot of caring, compassionate people in our community.
Yes, there is.
And initially your first thought is, well, why don't we just, arrest them or put them on a bus or do something? And that's certainly one approach, but that's not necessarily the approach we're taking at the Homeless Roundtable, is it?
No, the approach that we're taking is very balanced. And while we will discuss at times the issues that the police department has to deal with, or code enforcement, because there is an entity that has to make sure that when there is an encampment, there are procedures that we follow if we have to clean them up, because it's on somebody's property.
Right.
And for every well-intentioned citizen or group, they're not realizing that there is maybe a property owner that has the liability and the consequences of cleanup. Mm-hmm. So the coordinated effort really focuses on, while there is an enforcement arm to this, there's no stronger advocate in the community for trying to solve this than the police department. Maybe from a different approach, but Dave and his officers that work under his direction, and most of patrol that deals with the calls and complaints that come in, are the ones that are talking to those who are homeless. The goal that we have is look, maybe not today, but we certainly are connected through the resources and the knowledge of where they can get help. For every person that we may identify that was panhandling, maybe not, but certainly the homeless population, you can describe some are homeless by choice, others may be transient, and what they would love is nothing more than an opportunity. So you can categorize the homeless into three basic areas, and one is really, as we see, is resource ready. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that just missed out on a paycheck. And so there's a lot of organizations out there that would just love to help them, and so part of the roundtable is trying to find that conduit of connectivity that says there's a need here and here's how we can solve it. Mm-hmm. There's clearly going to be a huge mental health and drug and alcohol component too when you see the homeless, because what caused it? What was that person's first point in time where they became homeless and they made a choice? But many times the choices are in front of them and they choose not to receive the help. They choose not to receive the housing because it's not on their terms. Mm-hmm. So somehow there has to be resources with accountability. It's a common theme in the discussions we have at the roundtable.
Mm-hmm. And how do you, we're back to the old, well, so what do you do? What do you do? I mean, we're trying to connect, there are people who are newly homeless, right? And I would imagine that those folks are the ones that are probably the easiest to serve because they don't want to be in this situation. Those folks, we can help those folks. But the chronically homeless, I've decided to be homeless. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that, Dave?
Well, we have to look at it from a couple of different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
We look at it from the perspective of the homeless person. We're trying to do everything we can to try to help them, to try to offer them the resources, to try to do whatever we can to improve their situation. But we also look at it from the perspective of the close to 100,000 residents of Vacaville that aren't homeless and whose quality of life is being affected by some of the decisions that those people are making. So what we can do is go out there, we try to offer them resources, we try to give them suggestions to help improve their situation. Mm-hmm. If they don't go with that, if they're not ready for that, then we go with the enforcement angle, which is to enforce ordinances that are already on the books for camping, for trespassing and things like that, to try to offset some of the damage that's being caused by these camps that are destroying private and public property.
Right. I would imagine the approach is a lot like what we're doing with the drought, right? We want to educate people. We'd prefer you saved water. We don't want to fine you. We don't want to cite you. We want to help you. And I guess that's the same approach we're using with the homeless situation, right?
Absolutely. It is. And I've told many people over and over again, a lot of times it has to do with alcohol and drug dependency, and they're just not in that place where they're ready. Right. And I talk to them and say, hey, here's my card, here's my phone number. You come see me, call me when you're ready. Until then, we're going to have to keep going with we cite you, we arrest you, we do these things because we don't have another choice. Right. You have to make the decision whether you're ready to do that. And when you are, I'll help find the resources to help you.
So what would you say to somebody if, and maybe you've done this, maybe you haven't. If you see a resident giving a homeless person money, have you ever approached them or said, hey, don't do that? Or has that happened? Or
I haven't approached them when it's happening, but I've talked to people afterwards and try to explain to them where most of that money is going to. Because we have great resources here in the city of Vacaville.
Right.
We have resources that will feed homeless people. We have resources that will help get them to shelter. Most of the money that they're giving to, if it's an actual homeless person, is going to feed their addictions.
Right.
So I try to explain to them, look, if it's wonderful that you want to help, let me try to point you in the direction where you can do the most good. And that's
would
what
be
we try
like
to do.
Opportunity House or some other, even the Mission Solano, somewhere that takes that $5 and can serve 20 people as opposed to $5 that's either for a bottle of booze or some drugs or cigarettes or whatever the addiction might be.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And I guess that's the message we try to get to our residents is man, it's great that our community is so caring and compassionate, but we need to direct that compassion to a more productive way, both for us and for the person they're trying to help, right?
Correct.
And that's the hardest nut to crack, is to get that message out there and to get people to understand what we're trying to do. And that's a challenge.
And that's why I think the education piece is equal to the engagement and the enforcement. Because the education, there's the two components. There's the individual that has, a gracious heart and believes that whether it's just personal reasons or religious reasons, it doesn't matter. There's a compassion that says, I feel compelled to do something. So on balance, what we're trying to do is help the individual who's driving out of a parking lot or sees somebody who is somehow drawing on the heartstrings of whatever it is. It's the props, it's the signs, it's seeing a young child with them, a dog, it doesn't matter. But it causes you to consider, am I going to give to this person?
Right.
And the problem is you don't know what you're giving to.
Right.
So then the flip side is trying to coordinate with our round table and to bring the resources together. Some of them are in competition with each other. But the goal really is you always have to look at what is the final end goal here. And that is, if we may never be able to solve it 100%. But if we have programs in place and a cooperation where the public will invest into the groups, and the groups will always look at what the end goal is and don't create the unintended consequences, then we can do our part. Because our goal isn't to draw people to Vacaville because it's a generous place. Our goal is to deal with what we do with Vacaville. And we partner with a lot of agencies in the county and mental health, and just trying to solve these problems so that we can actually have a better quality of life for everyone, including those who just choose right now not to accept the resources in front of them.
Right. So, and if this is not a fair question, I understand, but if you could put a number on the number of homeless in Vacaville, can we do that? Can we say there's 200, there's 400?
I think it fluctuates on a daily basis, but right now at this moment, I would say it's less than 100.
Less than 100, okay. But still, it's less than 100, but it's a visible 100. We hear from downtown merchants, from folks at the library, from almost every business, I would imagine daily, about somebody doing something, scaring somebody. Right. Just their presence scares people, And I don't want to give anybody the impression that they're harmless, but you tell me, what kind of threat is there from these folks?
Well, I don't. For the most part, they're not a threat. They're doing what they do, which is congregate in groups, sit around and talk and drink. They're not out there to cause harm to anyone. Right. But they can start to fight with each other. They can start to get very verbal and can be offensive to a lot of people because they start drinking and get later in the afternoon and they start making comments to other people. But as far as physical violence, we haven't had incidences of homeless people being physically violent with the general population. Okay. I can't say it would never happen, and I can't say it's never in history happened, but it's not a major issue for us.
Yeah. It clearly is, individual-based violence or behavior. Because if somebody doesn't get money because their angle is not to go beg for it, they may steal for it. So there are the unintended consequences of thinking that it's okay. The biggest challenge is it a housing issue? Because when we look at the whole idea of homelessness, whether it's the grants through Veterans Affairs and also through housing, when we think of the concept housing first, is those who are in need. If you could connect to the person who really wanted it and needed it, it's like a 12-step process. It doesn't happen overnight, but there's that point when somebody says, I want to do something different with my life. But there really are those who, and I've seen them over my career, that at age 18 could come home and have dinner, chose to live underneath a bridge, and to this day, that's their lifestyle. And I've had those conversations with them 20 years ago. For some, it's a choice. But at some point, the alcohol and drug addictions, and then what often we see is a lot of the mental health issues that go with it, then become the trap. So what started as this is my potential rebellious approach, I don't want to live in the living conditions that you say I should live in. But at some point, it really is hard to change an institutionalized mindset.
They can't get out of what
That's
they've
correct.
gotten themselves into, basically.
That's correct.
Well, I think it's great that we have the homeless roundtable. There's a lot of caring people in those meetings. It's kind of a cool atmosphere to be in, you know. And the balance between the enforcement and the compassion and you know, I definitely think we're on the right track in terms of how we're dealing with this problem. You know, you want people to be patient, and when I say people, I mean our residents, because it's not a problem that happened overnight, and it's not a problem we're going to solve overnight either, is it?
That's right.
So we're working on it. We're getting there, and I believe in this budget cycle have they set aside some funds for you to do a little more in your department, or has that happened yet, or am I way off base?
Well, I think we're all in the works of trying to see where the budget lands. Clearly, as department heads throughout the city, Public Works, the fire department, housing, the police department, we realize we're all spending the money anyway. When there's a need for a cleanup, when there's code enforcement, when there's law enforcement actions, we're all coming together. We're meeting as a city group internally, separate than just the homeless roundtable, because we're the ones that are going to be tasked with dealing with the issue. Our goal is partnering with everyone. So from a budget standpoint, we are working on that right now from the city's perspective to see how do we structure our departments in a way and fund that so that we're dealing with the problem that we know is in front of us anyway.
And it's not going away.
It's not going away.
It's there. Let's deal with it. Let's face it now and keep it from becoming a problem that's out of control. That, you know, 100 doesn't sound like a lot, but as I said earlier, it's a very visible 100 folks, you know. I mean, when I got here, it was Yolanda and, you know, these people, you know them by name, and it's almost kind of a joke. But it's changed in the last couple of years, and we don't have any choice but to address it now. And that's a big part of what you do every day, Dave. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I mean, I can't imagine, you know, I talked to somebody today, I said, have you ever gone up to somebody and asked them? No, God, no. Well, me neither. You know, that's the part of what you guys do that people, I don't know if they don't understand it or don't appreciate it. I certainly do, because that's why we have police officers and soldiers, and because I couldn't do it. I would find it would be difficult for me to do that. I'll help you in any way I can. Anything else you want to add about what we're doing in terms of homelessness or anything else in the department?
You know, I'll just end with this. There's a reason why we call it There's a Better Way. It's because we're trying to get people to understand you can't think about this the same way you always have. One of the crises that's plaguing us and across America is when we think of the homelessness, you can't think of that without also looking at the major challenges of our problems with mental illness. And that's a huge part of what we deal with. You see people talking to themselves, and that just stirs up the emotions in our community. We have the resources. The funding and the support is all there. The challenge is when you don't have people who want those resources, so how do you enforce that? So we're working on it, and it's only through partnership. And we meet every month in the Homeless Roundtable. In fact, in about 2 hours, we'll be meeting in our regular place in Conference Room A and B. It's open to the public. We welcome people to be there. It's usually the third Wednesday of every month at 3 o'clock in City Hall. So I welcome those. You don't have to be an organization to attend.
Yeah, open to the public.
Open to the public.
And to take it a step further, you mentioned resources. We have a resource guide on our website that's both specific to Vacaville and the entire county. We'll have a page on our website I'm not sure what we're going to call it yet, but it'll be something that people can go to find resources either for themselves or for someone they know. And it's exciting to be in a community that's going to kind of address this in a real, and I've used the word several times, but I'll use it again, compassionate way, as opposed to the let's put the hammer down on someone who's less fortunate than us. That's not the Vacaville way anyway.
No.
So
community policing is not all about enforcing laws. It is there is a compassionate side to what's going on, no matter what anyone thinks.
Right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for taking a little time out of your day to talk about homelessness in Vacaville. I'm sure we're on the right track, and thank you for your efforts, and thank you for watching this episode of On the Beat.